Hello, everyone. I'm John Peachey, and I've been asked to speak on conflicts of interest in financial integrity. And in the interest of integrity, I am using a virtual background. I took the photo myself and no money exchanged hands. But I'd like to share just what I'm going to be talking about in these next 10 minutes or so. And that is, first of all, giving you a definition of conflicts of interest, sharing some of the areas that there might be conflicts of interest as Christian leaders, especially in Youth with a Mission, and then also looking at some of the scriptures of stewardship, and finally, how we respond in areas that might be conflicts of interest. So I could tell stories for hours, but let me share my screen here in just a moment. As Christian leaders, we're really about God's family business, and that's the priority. God first, the family, the relationships within the family of God, and then the business of the kingdom, really, that we're called to serve as faithful stewards. Conflicts of interest arise in a variety of ways, really. So as we look at some of those, what is a conflict of interest? First of all, it can be anything that could affect or be perceived by others to affect your decision making. So financial integrity also involves when we have the decision-making power to allocate resources. And also conflicts of interest could be friends or family relationships, financial, gifts and entertainment, multi-level sales, external boards, confidential communications, or lots of other areas as well. I think it's important to emphasize that it's not only something that maybe that you would do wrong, but something that could be perceived as a conflict or competing interest. And so in YWAM, one of those areas that I think about is finances. And especially if you're pioneering or you're starting out, often you're putting a lot of your own resources and you're sacrificing yourself to get things underway with a small team. It's really important that as soon as possible, the decision making and the record keeping for those accounts and decisions are kept separately. And really, it's best if more people can be involved in financial decision making as soon as possible. Be sure that there are good records. This is an area where sometimes leaders can decide that because there's no money for the ministry, they'll put in their own money, but they can plan perhaps to take out that money later on when some gifts come in. And that's really a conflict of interest. It needs to be very clear that a decision has been made to make a loan to the ministry, or whenever any loans are being made from the ministry to any person, which we strongly recommend that you avoid. And so friends and families can also cause a conflict of interest. It could be, for example, that the housing or accommodation that is made is being partially funded by other team members. And that all just needs to be very open and transparent, and avoid using money that would come in really to personally benefit yourself or your family. Another area is in receiving gifts or entertainment or things. Perhaps we're not so likely to be bribed. We don't have that much that our decisions can benefit others in some ways. But gifts can be made, and it's not clear, is that gift to you personally or is that gift to the ministry? And it's really important to clarify with donors and not to take money that has been given to a ministry. Another conflict of interest can be through multi-level sales. This seems to be increasing around the world amongst Christians. And the danger here is that you're using friends and relational networks that could be within the ministry to gain income from it. And those types of relationships can be twisted or changed, especially as you go on that. So really avoid multi-level sales within a YWAM team or within a YWAM campus. There's some other areas of confidential communication. I want to mention a few things that I've experienced as well. And one would be in the allocation of housing. I've found it to be really important that, especially as you get established, leaders are not the ones who are assigning the housing, that's been delegated to more operational leaders, perhaps a housing group or someone who's responsible. Also, in this whole area of how much people pay for their housing. Sometimes leaders have done privately, saying, oh, well, you only have to pay this much, or you have to pay this much, or even there are stories of where a leader has decided that people from certain nations will pay a lower amount, and he himself is from that nation. That's a real conflict of interest. Sometimes for payment of services as well. For example, you might have a board member who is also an accountant. And although they may have offered their services free for a time, they now are needing to be remunerated or paid for some of their services. And it may be a great deal for YWAM, but that has to be a minuted board decision, and it has to be disclosed that a trustee is receiving payment. The same goes for other YWAM trustees as well, certainly within this nation. All of the reimbursements, for example, even for travel, that would be perhaps to attend meetings or have to be declared and made known to the Charity Commission. So make sure you're keeping records in all of those kinds of benefits that might be being received. I'm just going to share this next slide here. For unless you're honest in small matters, you won't be in the large ones. If you cheat even a little, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. And if you're untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? This is a key important thing for us as stewards. It's required in stewards that they remain faithful, that they be found faithful, from 1 Corinthians 4:2. And Daniel is a wonderful example of someone who, in regard to government affairs, they couldn't find any accusation, no grounds for corruption, inasmuch as he was faithful. He was a faithful steward in the government. No negligence or corruption was to be found in him. I want to mention it again, that it's not only that you have not done something wrong, but also that you're not perceived by others to have done something wrong. So a faithful steward will be accountable, will practice honesty and transparency, and a few other things, to give generously and spend wisely. Sometimes those things are in some conflict between them, and to really avoid debt whenever possible, and not to get ministry or personally into debt. What to do when you recognize a conflict of interest? Ask these kinds of questions. First of all, reflect and recognize them. How would Jesus see this? How would legal or financial authorities see this? How would my critics now or in the future see this if they knew about this decision or this competing interest or conflict of interest? And of course, what would be the effect if this were shouted from the rooftops later on? And that's why transparency is so important, to be open about these things. What to do? Declare it transparently to other leaders, to the legal board, to those who might gain or lose as a result of this decision. And really, competing interests must be declared. For example, if you're on a board of another organization and you begin to share confidential information about one organization with another, that can be a real conflict of interest, and that should be avoided. Another thing would be to excuse yourself from decision making. For example, if a decision about a housing allocation or something were to be made, or a financial remuneration, and you or someone you're close to would be benefiting from this, you remove yourself from that decision and allow others to make that decision without your influence. Always ask that accurate records are kept of decisions and who made those decisions, and make sure that your financial transactions are recorded, they're transparent, they're open to scrutiny. People can look at the books and see what took place. Being accountable means giving an account to, of course, the Lord Jesus at the end of time, but also giving an account now to the responsible authorities in our lives, and to others, and to those whom we lead. So really, I hope that that's given you a bit of an idea about what a conflict of interest is, how to relate to them. Avoid using money that's been designated for one thing for something that it's not designated for. And let's try to really avoid these conflicts of interest. Be transparent, be accountable, and give a good count to one another and to the Lord Jesus. Thanks very much. for listening.